The NFL season is back, and that means I have to throw my hat in the ring and make some predictions for this upcoming season. In this video, I predict every single game in the NFL season, and I come up with some final records and my Super Bowl champion. Alongside that, I'm going to call out some awards, some teams to watch out for, and some players to watch out for this NFL season. Now, while this obviously isn't any gambling advice and I wouldn't bet on any of these picks, I do think I have some pretty good predictions in here, and I do think I picked the best team to be the Super Bowl champion for this season. But before we get into those predictions, I want you guys to check down below and see if you're subscribed. Make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, it would mean a lot to me. And on this video, if you like my takes, leave a like. If you don't like them, leave a dislike, but make sure you comment down below and let me know who do you think is going to win each division and is going to be the Super Bowl champion. I genuinely think that this is one of the hardest NFL seasons to predict. There is a ton of talent throughout the league, and I truly think that the vast majority of teams could be competing for a playoff spot. With that being said, I'm just going to go through each and every division and let you know where I think the teams are going to finish. So in the background here, you can see me predicting every single game. So just keep that in mind while you're listening to these division predictions. But first, we're going to start out in the AFC North. And on top of the AFC North, one of the most competitive divisions every year, I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to finish 12-5. I think offensively, they will continue to do what they've done with Lamar Jackson under center. I think Lamar is, again, one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. They can do so much with him offensively. You have Derrick Henry back there. You have some more depth in the running back room that will come back healthy. Derrick Henry, again, getting older, but I still think he has some more juice left in the tank, and that offense is just something to behold. Defensively, they added Jair Alexander. We'll see what he does, but I think he's going to be a big addition for that team. In second place, unfortunately missing the playoffs, but again winning the 9-8 Super Bowl, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, I think the Steelers team has one of the best defenses in all of football, but what are you going to get out of that offense? I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's a great quarterback anymore, and I think he's going to continue to do what kind of Russell Wilson did last season and not really add much to this offense. Now, while they did add DK Metcalf, I don't think he's a great fit on this offense. I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers. His arm probably is getting weaker. DK Metcalf really is a go-route receiver, and I don't think he's going to add a ton to this offense. I think, outside of him, they don't have a ton of weapons. They have a running back room that's questionable, an offensive line with some holes, and I think that offense, again, is going to be the Achilles heel of this team. Next up, I have the Cincinnati Bengals finishing 6-10. I think this is finally the year where they fire their head coach. I think he's done a horrible job. You have a guy in Joe Burrow who's arguably a top 3 quarterback, at least a top 5 quarterback. You have some great weapons. And again, this team they made one Super Bowl, but outside of that, they haven't really done much. This defense, again, is going to struggle. They made some additions on the offensive line, so I think there's going to be a little bit of improvement there. But outside of that, the defense was not improved at all. They've had some issues off the field this season, and I think, Trey Hendrickson, while he did get that contract, I don't know how happy he's going to be. And, you could see him getting traded at the trade deadline if this is what their record is going to look like. And in last place, of course, you have the Cleveland Browns, who go 3-14. I think their quarterback situation is going to be a struggle. I think the defense is going to be pretty good, but they're just going to be on the field too much. And I think that inevitably is going to make them look statistically worse than they actually are talent-wise. And then, quarterback situation, as I said, but weapons-wise, I mean, they don't have a ton of weapons. They have some guys who perform pretty well, but you have guys that really only have had one good season, if that, in the wide receiver room. So a lot of questions there for their offense. All right, the next division we got here is the AFC East, and I have the Buffalo Bills winning the division. I mean, you can't really go against Josh Allen. The Bills have kind of owned this division for a few years now. I actually have them going 6-0 in the division, so I think that's the main reason they're going to win. I think they're going to dominate this division, but I don't really know where they improved. to be honest with you. I mean, they just re-signed Gabe Davis as I record this. What is he going to do? He was not very good since he left Buffalo, but now he's coming back. We'll see what he does. The wide receiver room, again, is questionable. Don't really know where Josh Allen's going to go with the ball, but you know Josh Allen, he's going to put up the stats. He's going to run the ball. They have a great rushing attack, and I think the offensive line, again, is league average, so they'll do okay there. Defensively is where I have some question marks. Again, I don't know about that DB room. It's going to be questionable. I think the linebackers are the strength of this team, but they've had some injuries over the past few seasons, so we'll see if they can stay healthy. But I do think the Bills are the best team in this division. But I think a team that's catching up with them quickly is a team that's going to make the playoffs in my predictions and also finish 12-5, and that's the New England Patriots. Now, I do see them dropping some divisional games, going 3-3, which is what will cost them. But this Patriots team is improving rapidly. And, you know, I know NFL fans aren't going to be happy that the Patriots are coming back, but I think they got another really solid QB. I think they've given him some weapons, although I'm not really sure about the whole Stefon Diggs thing. I think Diggs is kind of a guy that seems like he might be falling off. So we'll see what he does this season. They gave him a lot of money in the offseason, so we'll see what he does. But I think this defense is really, really good. Christian Gonzalez is one of the most underrated players in football. At the corner position, I think he's a top 3 corner in the league. And outside of that, I think their secondary is really, really good. I think their defensive line is going to continue to improve. And I really like this Patriots team going into the season. Now, in third place, I have the Miami Dolphins. And I wanted to predict them to go even worse than 4-13. But, you know, this division, they have the Jets. You know, I have them beating the Patriots at home because they always seem to beat the Patriots at home for whatever reason. And they have some other games that are pretty competitive for them. So I have them getting 4 wins, but I think after this season, you're going to see some changes. I think you could see Tyreek Hill getting traded mid-season. I wouldn't be surprised. I think there's some other guys that could get traded. And, you know, this offseason, they're going to, or I guess next offseason in this case, they're going to have a little bit of a reset because they have a lot of big holes on this team that just aren't going to get fixed in one offseason. So I think they'll have some big changes, some coaching changes, and we'll see what they do moving forward. And then in last place in the division, I have the Jets. Now, realistically, do I think the Jets could get more than 4 wins? Absolutely. They have a talented team. They just never are able to get it done. They also have Justin Fields starting, who I'm just not comfortable with as a starting quarterback in this league. And then they have a lot of question marks on offense. You know, Garrett Wilson, he's great, but outside of him, you just have a lot of guys that, you know, are really inconsistent. And I just don't know how to feel. You know, Breece Hall, a guy that's super talented, but has had his up and downs. You know, you have Xavier Gibson, Josh Reynolds, Allen Lazard. Like, what is that receiving room? Mason Taylor, your starting tight end. I just don't know. The offensive line, I think, is going to be much improved. Oli Fashanu at left tackle, I really like. Obviously, Armand Menbu, their first-round pick, I also really liked heading into the draft. So I think the line could be good, but I think the rest of the team probably took a little bit of a step back. And then you have this defense that is super talented, but the last few years they just haven't performed up to the standards that, you know, many people think that they would. Next up, we have another very difficult division to predict in the AFC South. Now, winning it, I have the Houston Texans, and I still don't know how I feel about this even after going through every single game. I just feel like the Texans are a kind of question mark of a team. I have them going 10-7, so nothing super special, but I think this team offensively is going to rebound. I think CJ Stroud is a super talented quarterback, and I don't think last season really showed what he was. The offensive line is just, I don't know what to think of it. I think it's going to be horrible, but this defense, man, is just so good, so talented. I think DeMeco Ryans is a great coach. I think he's going to get the best out of this defense. And I think the offense, again, CJ Stroud, you have some pretty solid weapons offensively around CJ Stroud. So I think this team could put up some points offensively, even with an offensive line with a lot of question marks. So we'll see what they do, but I really do think that this team is going to win this division. I think they'll go 5-1. I think a guy in Christian Kirk is a guy that could be really solid. Jaden Higgins I really liked in the draft. So you have some weapons there, as I said, and we'll see. Again, I think the main thing with this team, and I've said it now 3 times, is this offensive line. If they can be league average, this team is probably going to go better than 10-7. So we'll see what happens there. And another team that I have making the playoffs is the second place team in this division. That is the 10-7 Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I think they're going to stumble in the division going 2-4, but I really like this team, and honestly, I could see them easily winning this division. Now, I know that's a pretty common pick this season from a lot of people predicting, but this team has a lot of talent. I really like the hiring of Liam Cohen. I think he did a lot for the Tampa Bay offense last season, and I think this Jaguars offense is going to be pretty solid. The offensive line, again, with like I've been saying for a lot of these teams, is a question mark. We'll see what they get from them. I think Brenton Strange is a really solid tight end. This receiving room, you got Brian Thomas obviously leading it. We'll see what we get from Travis Hunter. I think he's super talented. Honestly, I think he might even be underrated. I know that's crazy to say with all the hype, but I think he's a stud receiver and DB. And then Dyami Brown, wide receiver 3, I think you can't underrate him. You got Parker Washington, you got Tim Patrick. In the running back room, you have Travis Etienne, who has struggled, but you have Tank Bigsby, who performed pretty well last season. So I think offensively, they're doing pretty solid. And then the defense, a ton of talent, one of the best defensive lines in the AFC. I really like their linebacker room. You just got to question the secondary, but, you know, if Travis Hunter is performing there, then you got him, you got some other guys that could perform pretty well. And I think Tyson Campbell, again, you know, he struggled last season. I think if you get him back, he could be really good. So we'll see, but I really like this Jaguars team. In third place, I have the Indianapolis Colts. I think a team that's the definition of mid in the NFL. I think there's a lot of talent on this roster, right? There's a ton of talent. I think Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in football. Michael Pittman is a really solid receiver. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1, realistically. I think he'd be a great number 2, but he's the number 1 on this team. You drafted Tyler Warren, who's going to be a stud, 100%. You have a really solid offensive line, but again, you look at the quarterback room, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson. Now, I'm a little higher on Daniel Jones than most people, but I just don't think he's going to do great in this system. Anthony Richardson, I mean, the less said about him, the better. What a horrible first-round pick. And then defensively, again, it's just what this team is. It's mid. There's nothing really special about it. They have some okay players, but no real studs. And then, again, like, I just don't know how to feel about this team. Travarius Ward coming here, I think, could be good. I think, you know, Kenny Moore, a veteran, Xavier Howard, a veteran. Like, I just don't know the direction of this team. I think, again, the prediction was 7-10, so I think that's a solid record for them. But again, they're staying stuck in the worst spot you can be in sports, and that's mid. And then in last place, again, for the second year in a row, I have the Tennessee Titans going 5-12. Again, I think, you know, Cam Ward is a great quarterback. I don't know why nobody's really talking about him. I think he's going to be a good player, but just talent-wise on this roster, I don't think it's fully there yet. I think there's some good building blocks, especially on the defense. I really like where this defense is heading in the future. The offense just doesn't really have the weapons, in my opinion, to get the best out of Cam Ward in his rookie season, but I think he'll put up some decent numbers. We'll see if I have him winning Rookie of the Year, but I just don't really know how I feel about the weapons here. The running back room, the offensive line is still questionable. But yeah, like I said, I think this defense could be good. But we will see how some of these injured guys from last season recover. And yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do this season. And the last division, of course, is the AFC West. And again, I have the Chiefs retaining, although I do have them falling off a little bit, finishing 10-7. So a lot of similar records here in the AFC. You know, you had the AFC East winner 12-5, the AFC North winner 12-5, the AFC South winner 10-7, and then the Chiefs here winning this division at 10-7. So I think it's going to be competitive, as I said early on, but this Chiefs team, I just don't know what to think. They have some decent wide receivers this year. Obviously, they were both hurt last season or suspended. Rashid Rice is suspended the first 6 games of the season. Hollywood Brown, I just don't know how he's going to do recovering off his injury. You have Patrick Mahomes, who honestly was not really Patrick Mahomes last season, so I think he'll at least rebound in some aspect because he's not a bad quarterback. Travis Kelce had the arguably worst season of his career last season. Apparently, this could be his last season, so we'll see what he does. So a lot of questions on offense. I think the offensive line, Josh Simmons, could be the steal of the draft. I personally think he will be. He's going to be a great tackle for years to come. But defensively, again, a really good defense, right? We know how well this defense has performed under Steve Spagnuolo. I don't really need to talk about it that much. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, the rest of that defensive line is really good. The linebacker core, arguably the deepest linebacker core in the NFL. And then, as always, the biggest question for them defensively is the secondary. But, you have Trent McDuffie, who's one of the best corners in the league. So I think this team will be back in the playoffs this season. In second place, and also having a 10-7 record and making the playoffs, I have the Denver Broncos. Now, I expect this defense to be one of the best in all of the NFL. They're super deep at every position, and I think this team could honestly be carried by their defense. Looking at the offense, you have a guy in Bo Nix who, those quarterbacks, man, they tend to take a second-year slump a lot of the time, so we'll see what Bo Nix has there, but I do think the addition of Evan Ingram could be big. Outside of him, though, I don't really know how much I trust his weapons. I know Courtland Sutton is usually pretty consistent with what he does, but I still don't think he's a true number 1 alpha wide receiver, so we'll see what they have there. And then in the running game, it's just a big question mark. They shuffled some cards there, but realistically, how much should they improve? I don't know. So 10-7 it is for the Broncos. In third place is a team that I feel like I always hate on, but I just don't know. And that is the 8-9 Chargers. I almost said San Diego, but they're in LA and they've been in LA for a minute. So yeah, the Chargers 8-9. I think Coach Harbaugh came in, established a culture. I think they still have some holes in that team realistically. And the fact is that team just always seems to choke when they should win. They don't win close games. It doesn't happen. So I can't predict them to make the playoffs until they actually prove to me they can make the playoffs. And quite honestly, there is some pretty big holes on this team. The secondary doesn't look very good. The defensive line is questionable. Losing a guy in Mr. Bosa, who has been with that team since they were in San Diego, one of your leaders there. We'll see what you have from the rest of the guys, but a big question mark defensively. I think offensively, I like the running backs. Obviously, I like the quarterback. The running back room is pretty interesting. They have a lot of guys that could produce, but you got to, try and get one guy that's going to be that stud. And then have the other guy be the change of pace. I think Amaron Hampton should be that starter, but we'll see what they do there. But yeah, overall, I think an 8-9 finish would be kind of disappointing for this team, but I can't predict them to finish better than that. And in last place at 2-15, which I think is a little egregiously bad, but whatever. It is the Las Vegas Raiders. And look, this Raiders team has some talent. I'm just concerned that Geno Smith is going to fall off a cliff. Like, I don't know why I'm a Geno Smith hater, but, a lot of people seem to think that he's this elite quarterback, and yes, he's been pretty solid with the Seahawks, but he's had a lot of weapons, and this Raiders team just doesn't have almost any weapons. Obviously, you have Ashton Jeanty, but you got to see first if he's going to actually, do what he did at Boise in the NFL, and I think he could, but outside of him, you really have nothing offensively. And then the defense, again, a ton of holes. They have a solid pass rush, but, outside of that, what do they have? Their secondary is pretty bad. Their linebacking core is pretty bad. I just don't really trust this team at all, and that's why I have them coming in last place in this division. All right, moving on here to the NFC. I'm going to try and go through this a little faster because this video is already nearly 20 minutes, so I'm going to try and speed it up a little bit. Starting in my favorite division with my favorite team, the Philadelphia Eagles, I have them winning the NFC East. That's right, I have them bucking the trend. The first team since the Philadelphia Eagles in 2003 to repeat. Look, I think this team is just going to win in this division. I have them going 5-1. I had them going 6-0, but I do think the Commanders could take one from them. the Cowboys and the Giants are going to struggle this season. We all know what happened in Dallas. I'll talk about that when we get to them, but this Eagles team lost some talent, but offensively, they pretty much remained the same. And then defensively, they were one of the youngest defenses in the league last year. So I think those guys can only really improve. And, biased aside, like, I think this Eagles team is the most talented roster again in the NFL. So we'll see if I'm right, but I think this team has a good chance to repeat as Super Bowl champions. In second place, and actually missing the playoffs, even though they have a 10-7 record, and I think that tells you what I think about the NFC versus the AFC, is the Washington Commanders. Now, 10-7 isn't that big of a fall off compared to last season, but I think Jayden Daniels has a chance to maybe regress a little bit because he was just insane last season. This was the oldest roster in the league last year. I believe they're the oldest roster again by average age, and that's going to take a toll. I think you could see some guys that performed really well last season struggle. I think the running back room, there's some question marks. You have Terry McLaurin, but what are you going to get out of those other wide receivers? Deebo Samuel, what are you going to get out of him coming over? He was really pretty bad last season, so we'll see what you get from him in the wide receiver 2 position. But yeah, there's just a lot of question marks with this Commanders team. I think they overperformed last year. I think 10-7 is fair enough for where they are talent-wise. And in third place, I have the 7-10 Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, we all know about the Micah Parsons trade. It still blows my mind that happened. I mean, how often do you see the best pass rusher in the NFL get traded? I'll give you the answer, like one time ever. The only time I can really remember is Khalil Mack, and he wasn't even the best pass rusher at the time. He was just a really great pass rusher. So yeah, I think Micah Parsons is going to be a huge addition, one for the Packers, but also a big subtraction from the Cowboys. And, I think they have a lot of other holes on this team. I don't like their head coach. I think that was a pretty bad hire, and another hire from Jerry Jones to just get a yes man. He doesn't bring a lot to the table. I think offensively, the running back room, again, is a big question mark. Last season, it was a big question mark, and you really saw how much it hurt the team. I think the offensive line, for once in Dallas, is kind of questionable. I think they have some good pieces, but they also have some pretty big holes. And then, the wide receiver room, you do add George Pickens, who is a talented player, but can he stay on the field and not lose his mind like he did quite often in Pittsburgh? That's a big question mark for him. And then defensively, you signed Deron Bland to that extension, but, outside of your secondary, the defensive line, I just don't know how to feel. I really think it's the worst defensive line in this division. The linebacker room, I just don't know. Like, there's a lot of parts of this team where I'm just like, I don't really know how to feel about it. I do give them 7 wins because they are the Dallas Cowboys and they do win games no matter what's going on, but there's just a lot of questions for me with this football team. And in last place, yet again, I have the New York Football Giants. Now, I've talked to a lot of my buddies that are Giants fans, and they say, okay, this team could perform pretty well, and I don't really agree with that at all, to be honest. I think they have a really good pass rush. Obviously, you have Dexter Lawrence, one of the best players in football, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter. Like, they're going to get some sacks. And, I think the secondary is definitely better than last season. I still don't think it's great, but it's definitely improved. The main issue defensively is the linebackers. I just don't really trust their off-ball linebackers that much. And then offensively, the offensive line, there's a lot of question marks there. Evan Neal, is he even going to start for this team? You have Russell Wilson as your starting quarterback. I don't know how to feel about that. Jackson Dart has a lot of upside. I did like him a lot, but he's not starting the season. When is he going to come in? And at that point, is it too late? You have Tyrone Tracy, who is a guy I think really overperformed last season. I could see him losing some yardage, some touchdowns this year. And then the wide receiver room, outside of Malik Neighbors, you truly have almost nothing. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, are they truly guys that should be getting a lot of snaps in the NFL? I don't really think so. So, again, I have this Giants team finishing in last place. Next up, we're going to jump to the AFC South, where I actually have 3 teams tied for first place. So, first, we're going to talk about the last place team, And in my opinion, the worst team in the NFL, the New Orleans Saints. There's not really much to talk about here. They have one of the worst QB situations I've ever seen going into a season. They have some talented players, but they're scattered all over the roster in random positions. So I don't really know how to feel about that. I'm really hoping we see Alvin Kamara on a different team by the end of the season, because he has not been on a competitive roster for most of his career, and it kind of sucks to see one of the best running backs in this generation pretty much win nothing. In second to last place and missing the playoffs, by the way, 2 of these 11-6 teams missed the playoffs, so that really sucks for them, but I have the Atlanta Falcons. It's just something about this franchise, man. They just get unlucky. I think this is a super talented team. The biggest question mark is that quarterback position. Will Michael Penix perform? I'm not really sure, so I'm kind of hedging my bets here and saying he'll be okay, but he won't be that amazing. I think there's another quarterback in another division on another team in the NFC that is going to be going into his first season as a starter that I like better. So we'll see what they do there. The Falcons go 3-3. There's not much to talk about with this roster. I think it's super talented. I think it literally all comes down to the quarterback position. So we'll see what happens with them this season. This is honestly the prediction I feel the worst about. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers missing the playoffs at 11-6. Now, that's crazy to me because this team is so talented, but in my defense, they have some really talented wide receivers, but you got Mike Evans, who's getting up there. Chris Godwin has had a lot of injuries. It's just hard. Tristan Wirfs is going to be out to start the season. People don't really know how long. Could be 4 weeks. It could be 10 weeks. Who really knows? Baker Mayfield, again, I really like it, but it's just hard for me to say that this offense is going to stay healthy when they have guys that are getting up there and don't have, very great injury histories. So we'll see what happens there. And then defensively, again, their defense is pretty good, but again, they have some of their best players getting up there in age. I think that's something that people aren't really talking about with this Tampa Bay team, is they're getting kind of old. So we'll see. Their pass rush is kind of questionable. You add Hassan Reddick, but as an Eagles fan, I don't really know how to feel about him. He hasn't done much the last 2 seasons, so we'll see. And then their corners are Jamel Dean has been pretty good. You draft Benjamin Morrison. I didn't really like him that much. Zion McCollum, I think, outperformed what he probably actually is last season. So, yeah, I have them missing the playoffs. I still have them with a good record, but Tampa Bay missing the playoffs. And winning the division, nobody tells me I'm not bold. I have the Carolina Panthers. That is right. I have them going 5-1 in the division. I had them struggling early but rebounding, and I think this team will get hot in the second half. I really, really, really like what they did this offseason. I know the preseason has been questionable, but Bryce Young, the end of last season, he performed pretty well. If he gets hurt, you have Andy Dalton, who has proven time and time again that he's a great backup. You have a ton of depth in your running back room, the deepest running back room in the NFL by far. Your wide receiver room, Ted McMillan, I think is going to be a stud right away. He's going to have over 1,000 yards. I really, really think Ted McMillan is the key piece here for this team. Aside of him, you have Xavier Legette, who at the end of last season started performing better. If he can just catch the ball, he had so many drops. I remember the game against the Eagles, he had a crucial drop. They would have won that game probably. So can he improve on that? And then you got, David Moore, again, Mr. Consistent. Hunter Renfrow, Jimmy Horn Jr., Jalen Coker is going to be coming back at some point this season. You have a really solid offensive line, in my opinion. It was one of their biggest holes 2 years ago. Now I think it's one of their strengths. And then the big question here is defensively. You have J.C. Horn. You're getting back Derek Brown. I think they could have made some more improvements in the draft, but I like some of their veteran free agent signings. So I think this defense will be still pretty bad, but not as bad as some of the units they've had in more recent seasons. And I think they sneak a division championship. All right, next up, I'm going to do the NFC West predictions. In last place, I have the Seattle Seahawks going 7-10. I think this team just signed a lot of veterans to be not bad, but I just don't see the upside with this team as being a team that can make the playoffs. Like, maybe they sneak their way in somehow, but I don't know how to feel about the veteran signings. Sam Darnold is a pretty lateral move at quarterback, maybe even worse than Geno Smith. You get rid of DK Metcalf, replace him with Cooper Kupp. Like, I just don't know how to feel about this team. I think there's a lot of holes. I think they honestly could finish even worse than this, realistically, with how good the other teams in this division are. So, Seattle Seahawks, 7-10. Right above them in the standings, I have the Arizona Cardinals. They're just like a team that's almost there, and I think after one more offseason, they could be a team that could compete. Obviously, going 8-9 isn't that bad, but it's just a team that has a few more pieces that they need, and I think they'll get there. Defensively, I think this defense is going to be really good. I think it's an underrated unit, but offensively, Kyler Murray, I just don't know how to feel about him. He's been super inconsistent, and then his weapons, you have Maserati Marv. I think he's going to be a lot better this season. So you have him, but outside of him, there's just not a lot there. So 8-9, 2-4 in the division. So again, struggling within the division costs them here. And at 11-6 and making the playoffs here, has some tiebreakers with Tampa Bay and Atlanta. I have the Los Angeles Rams. That is right. This team is super talented. Honestly, I could see them winning the division pretty easily, and I think they're better than the team I predicted them to come in second place to. But, schedule-wise, they have a pretty difficult schedule this season, so they're going to take some losses because of that. There's just so much talent on this team. The only question mark for me is the wide receivers and the quarterback. Davante Adams, again, super talented player. We all know what his upside is, but he hasn't really hit that upside in 2 seasons, so we'll see what he does. Matthew Stafford is so talented, like one of the most talented quarterbacks I've watched play football, has a great arm, but at some point you're going to see him fall off. It's got to happen. It happens to everybody. It happened to even Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, so is that going to happen this season? I don't want to say yes, but maybe hedging my bets here a little bit. If he does, this team could struggle a lot. And then on the other side of the ball, this defense, man, such a good defensive line, really good linebackers, and then the DB room pretty solid. So I really do like this Rams team. And, the team that's in first place here, and I still don't know how I feel about this even after making this prediction. I have the San Francisco 49ers. And I think a large part of this is just due to having a pretty easy schedule. They play a bunch of teams that I don't think are going to be good. They play the Saints and the Browns. They play the Colts. They play the Titans. Like, they have a lot of pretty easy games, and I think that will cause them to end up winning this division. But, they do have a talented team. Like, I got to look at it realistically. Like, as much as I like to hate on the 49ers as an Eagles fan, this team is really talented. They had a lot of roster turnover this offseason, but I think they did a good job replacing. I think getting Brian Robinson Jr. at RB2 is really awesome for them. I really like Ricky Pearsall's upside. You still have George Kittle. That offensive line, has some holes, but you still have Trent Williams there, so that left side's going to be pretty solid with him and Ben Barch. And then defensively, they get a lot younger, getting Mikael Williams, Nick Bosa coming back. You still have Fred Warner. The biggest question mark is going to be the secondary. I feel like a broken record was saying the secondaries are the biggest question mark, which I think is kind of the weakest position in the NFL right now is secondary players. It's the hardest position to play, so it makes sense. But yeah, we'll see how the secondary does, but I really do like this team, and I think, they have a pretty easy schedule, so look for them to win this division. And last, but certainly not least, I have the NFC North, and, as everybody's been saying this offseason, I agree with, I think anybody in this division could win it, but in last place, unfortunately, I have the Chicago Bears. Look, Caleb Williams needs to prove himself to me before I can pick this team to win football games, 5-12 as their record isn't the worst, but I have them going 0-6 in the division, and that's truly because they haven't really proven that they can beat any of these teams. Like, all these other teams are super talented, and for context, I have all the other teams in the division making the playoffs. It's going to be hard for the Bears. It's going to be an uphill battle for them, but I think This team has a lot of talent. I think their coaching staff is a lot better than it's been in previous years, so that's a bonus. But defensively, there's a lot of question marks. Offensively, like, they have a ton of weapons, but Caleb Williams needs to prove himself to me before I can pick this team to win games, and until he does that, I'm going to have them sitting at 5-12. And next up, unfortunately, the darlings of the NFL, I still have them making the playoffs, and that is the Detroit Lions, falling off a little bit, going 11-6. Realistically, I just don't know if this team improved in the offseason, and if you're not improving, you're just getting worse. So that's a big question for them. It's nothing to do with the talent on this roster, because the roster talent is there. It's just the other teams in this division improved a lot, in my opinion, and I just don't know what you're gonna get from this Detroit team that I think has some holes that people don't really want to talk about. This is hard for me, honestly. This division is so hard. These predictions in general are so hard. I feel like I'm gonna get clowned in the comments, but I feel really bad about this prediction. But I just feel like they're due to fall off. I don't really have a good explanation as to why, but they didn't improve. That's it. They just didn't improve. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't know. And next up here, finishing just ahead of them, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, again, I don't know. This division's really hard. I just really like the roster that the Vikings have put together. I think they have one of the best coaching staffs in the entire league. Both coordinators are really great. Kevin O'Connell is just an amazing coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. And this roster is just super talented. I know the Vikings have this whole thing of like, oh, they always choke and blah, 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 blah. But I really like J.J. McCarthy. I think he's going to perform. You have a great backup in Carson Wentz. No, I'm just kidding. I've always been a big Carson Wentz fan, but he's not that great anymore. Aaron Jones, a really consistent performer, but you have Jordan Mason and Chai Chandler behind them, so really solid. You got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison when he comes back from his suspension. You trade back for Adam Thielen and then Jalen Naylor. Like, this is a good wide receiver room. You have TJ Hawkinson as well at the tight end. One of the best offensive lines in the league, and then defensively, like, so much talent. You have Javon Hargrave, who I think is a guy that could, have a really good season after struggling with the 49ers. You have Jonathan Allen, who's performed in this league before. One of the best linebacker rooms in the league, up there with the Chiefs. And then the secondary, you add Isaiah Rodgers, who performed pretty well in some spot starts with the Eagles last season. And, Byron Murphy Jr., you got some great safeties. Like, this is a really talented team with almost no holes, in my opinion. So I have them finishing second, but, the team in first place made one of the biggest acquisitions of the offseason. And when you add one of the best pass rushers in the league to an already talented team, I got to predict you to win not only your division, but have the best record in the regular season in the NFC, and that's the Green Bay Packers, finishing at 13-4 and actually having the best record in the NFL this regular season. Now, this team has some holes, right? But this defense is just stacked. Micah Parsons automatically, to me, is like a +2 wins to this team. Like, before, I made it earlier predictions. I had them finishing third in the division. I think that he can put you over the top. He's a great player, one of the best players in the league, in my opinion. It's him and Myles Garrett up there as the best pass rushers, and he's just, man, he's so good. I cannot believe the Cowboys traded him. But offensively, I trust in Jordan Love. I do. I think he's a good quarterback. He has the talent. He's proven it. And I think he's going to succeed this season with this team. So, yeah, Green Bay Packers winning the division and winning the regular season, I guess. But now we're moving on here to the playoffs. And starting off, we're going to start out in the AFC. The 5 versus 4, Kansas City, the 4 seed, at home, beating the New England Patriots. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars going on the road and beating the Houston Texans. These Texans team, I know I have them in the playoffs, but there's some question marks there. And then I got the Bills pretty handily beating the Broncos as the 2 seed at home. In the NFC, I have the Carolina Panthers falling at home to the Minnesota Vikings. I have the LA Rams going on the road to beat the 49ers again. I think the 49ers' easy schedule gets them that home game, but I don't think they're going to win it. And then I have the Eagles beating the 7 seed Detroit Lions. This Eagles team, again, one of the Super Bowl favorites, most talented roster in the league. Moving on here to the divisional round, I have the Buffalo Bills finally getting over the hump, beating the Kansas City Chiefs. It finally happens. And I have the Ravens as the 1 seed, beating the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. In the NFC, I have the Eagles beating the Vikings, the 2 seed Eagles beating the 5 seed Vikings at home, going back to another NFC Championship game. And they will be facing a team they played in the playoffs last year, and that's the Rams, going on the road to Green Bay, winning. I think Matthew Stafford has a chance to make another run here. This is a super talented team, but yeah, the Green Bay Packers falling short yet again. Matt LaFleur just not really able to have a ton of playoff success. And then the conference championships, I have the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles going to the Super Bowl. And in the Super Bowl, I have the Baltimore Ravens winning it all. Lamar Jackson finally gets it done, beating a super talented Eagles team in a close matchup. A fun Super Bowl. But yes, I have the Baltimore Ravens winning it all. Quickly for the awards here, for MVP, I'm going to go Lamar again. I know he already has a couple, but Lamar Jackson, man, he's just so talented. I was thinking about maybe going Saquon, but if he didn't win it last year, I don't know how he could win it this year, so I'm going to go Lamar Jackson there. And then in terms of Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson. I think he's going to have an excellent season for the Atlanta Falcons. And, even though I don't really think the Falcons are going to have the season they want in making the playoffs, I think he is just going to have an exceptional season, and he's going to push them and see, if he can get them there. In terms of Defensive Player of the Year, there's just so many guys I could go with. This is probably the hardest award to predict, but I'm going to go with Micah Parsons on his new team. I just think that defensive line is so talented. He's going to, not get double teamed as much as he did in Dallas, and I think he could end up with 20 plus sacks. Offensive Rookie of the Year, again, another hard one. I'm going to go with Cam Ward, though. I know, a lot of people aren't going to pick a quarterback this year, but I think Cam Ward's going to have a pretty solid season there in Tennessee. And then last but certainly not least, comeback player of the year, obviously it's Aiden Hutchinson. I don't even need to predict that. I'm going to go with the safe pick and pick Abdul Carter. And with that last pick, that's going to conclude this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe for more videos coming out soon. I am super excited for this NFL season, just as I'm sure you are. So make sure you guys subscribe to this channel. Some more NFL content coming at you. Other sports too, but we're going to be focusing on the NFL here these next few weeks until the other sports get underway and the MLB playoffs get underway. So make sure you guys stay tuned to this channel and have a great rest of your day.